Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today, we'll be discussing how one organisation is bridging the gap between the Christian and the Jewish communities and standing up for Israel. Well, welcome to the programme. And today I have a very special couple all the way from Israel, but originally from the United States. Rebecca, your name is Rebecca Brimmer. You are the International President and CEO for Bridges for Peace. And I'm with your husband here, Tom Brimmer, who is an Israeli tour guide and does many other things for Bridges for Peace. So both of you, warm welcome to the programme.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you at Revelation TV today.
Very welcome, Rebecca. Rebecca, would you share with us how you came to the faith in the Lord Jesus Christ?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home. My father was a clergyman and was a pastor at the time. And one morning I woke up, or I don't know if I woke up or if it was the evening, I don't even know. I was 3 years old. And my mother says that I told her, "Mommy, I've been a bad girl. I need to ask Jesus into my heart." So I don't have a dramatic testimony. What I do have is a testimony of never having left the Lord. So from the time I was 3 years old until the present time, I have been living a life of a believer.
Incredible. And same question for you, Tom, as well. When did you come to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ?
Again, I grew up in a home where my parents were both Bible college graduates and a good Christian family. So as a very young child, I can't remember exactly. I think I was 8 or 9 years old. I came to my mother one morning and I said, "You know what? Jesus came and talked to me during the night. And he asked me if I would work for him and if I would be a minister for him." And I told him yes. And she said, "Well, we need to go to church and talk to the pastor about that." And we did, of course. And I can't say that I've been a great, faithful. I'm not as good as my wife, but you know, at this point in my life, that's my life. That is the absolute core of my life. I love to be the one who is in love with the Messiah.
Amen. Amen. That's fantastic. And you've been married 42 years. So, Rebecca,
right.
Our viewers will be wanting to know, how did you both meet?
So we met in Bible College in Springfield, Missouri. It was called Central Bible College, although some call it Central Bridal College. It's a great place to meet your spouse and a place where you're both studying the Word together. If you want the details, my husband has different ones than I do. So basically, from my remembrance, he kept asking me out and I kept turning him down because he seemed to date a different woman a different girl every week. Of course, he was recovering from some sort of heartache. At any rate, eventually we got together, and I would like to say that once we first went out on that first date, we never dated anyone else. That was it for us.
Fantastic. And Tom, would you share how the Lord really gave you a love and a passion for Israel?
Again, as a child, my parents being Bible people, I read the Bible, I loved the Bible, and I kept reading that, like, all the way through the Bible, from the start to the finish, Israel was involved and the Jewish people were involved. And that got to me somehow. It got to me in such a way that without knowing really the Jewish people, without knowing that much about the nation of Israel, I was watching from afar and I was fascinated. I remember when during the 6-Day War, we were seeing the reports, and my youngest sister came to me and she says, "Well, does this mean that it's time for Messiah to come?" And I said, "I don't think it's time yet, but I think we're getting close to that." And so it was something that was deeply ingrained to us as children. We loved to read the Bible stories, and we associated that with the modern nation of Israel.
Amazing, amazing. And also, Rebecca, same question to you. You've got quite a Christian Zionist heritage.
Yes, so I say my story starts before I was born. My story starts in 1941. My father was a little boy living in a very small town, 2,000 people in this town. And a town where nothing happens. You know, in a town of 2,000, the most exciting thing that happens is the farmers come to town and talk about how high their corn is. And so it was really an event when a man came from Germany and spoke in the church my father attended. And my father always said, he held up the Bible and said, the Bible says that God is going to bring the Jewish people back from all over the world. The Bible says that the nation of Israel will be reborn. And my dad said the people of this town ridiculed this man. They said, it's never going to happen. That's not what God meant. So a few years later, my dad's in high school, same small town, and someone gets on the loudspeaker and announces that Israel has become a nation. And my father said every hair on his body stood straight up, and suddenly he knew that the God of Israel was alive and that he was in the process of proving himself by keeping his promises to Israel. And so it changed my father's life, and because it changed his life, it changed my life. And Israel was just a constant in our home. Everything that happened in Israel, my dad would come in with a newspaper and he'd set it beside the Bible and he'd say, look at this. This is what Ezekiel talked about that. Isaiah spoke about this date. He'd open the scriptures for us. We watched the Six-Day War on television. We watched the Yom Kippur War. I visited Israel the first time in 1969 as a child. So my whole life was involved with the idea that the God of Israel is alive and he is keeping his promises to natural Israel. And the rest is history, I guess you could say.
Fabulous. And Tom, you're an Israeli tour guide. That's a very special job. Can you share with us some of the joys and some of the challenges of being a tour guide and bringing so many different nations to Israel and letting them see the Bible come alive, which is Israel itself?
Well, it's fascinating. Joel talks about 10 nations, 10 nationalities, 10 languages grabbing a hold of the garment of a Jewish person, saying, we will follow you, we will learn of your God because we have heard of your God. I've actually seen that take place. It takes place on a daily basis in Israel. It's so cool. It is the world's coolest job, you know. I mean, I get to explain the context of the Bible to people from all over the world, and every culture hears it differently. When I had a group from Singapore just recently, and they heard it as a message of peace. I had a group from the U.S. Just recently, and they wanted to know about Israel's military capabilities, and they heard it as if it was a military reality. And of course it is. Each nation hears it differently, but they all can understand the context of the Bible is deeply linked with the nation of Israel and the Jewish people, and that's fun for me to put that together for them.
Fabulous. Yeah, definitely one of your tours, I'm sure, would be extremely interesting, Tom. And Rebecca, you are the president and the international CEO of Bridges for Peace. Can you share with us the history of your organisation and the remit of what you do for Israel and the Jewish people?
Right. So in 1964, our founder came from the United States, although he was a Canadian, came to Israel with the idea of educating Christian leaders from the context of the Bible. So exactly what Tom was talking about. He felt like if Christian leaders could learn their Bible from the Hebrew language, from the geography of the Bible, from the customs of the Bible, that we would eliminate some of the differences between Christians and Jews. Along the same time, he was just one of these guys that just loved people. So, for instance, he drove his van for the college. He drove it as an ambulance during the Six-Day War, while his wife made sandwiches for soldiers and his students filled sandbags. Not too long ago, someone from the city of Jerusalem, actually it was a former mayor, came into our office and saw a certificate that had been given to our founder, Dr. G. Douglas Young, and it was the Yakir Yerushalayim Award. And he stopped immediately and he says, oh my, your founder was a very special man. He said, we have very few of these away, only to people that have really merited it and have really done something special for the nation of Israel. Well, Dr. Young started as educating Christians, but very soon it came into a reality that if you're going to bridge the gap between Christians and Jews, you can't just do it on one side of the bridge. And so we started projects in Israel to show the Jewish people that there are Christians today who believe that God has a plan to bless them, to show them that Christians today love them and want to see them do well. So we began raising money from Christians around the world, and today we're giving food every month to 22,000 people in 42 different communities across Israel. We work with mayors in 18 towns. We help children from underprivileged homes and to be able to succeed in school, and we help Jewish people come back from the lands of the North, the former Soviet Union. Over 70,000 of them now we have helped come back. So in many ways, we are showing the love of Jesus through Christian love and support for the nation of Israel.
Fabulous. So let's have a look now at the work being done in Israel by Bridges for Peace.
Bridges for Peace. Christians supporting Israel and building relationships between Christians and Jews in Israel and around the world. Bridges for Peace, 50 years of blessing Israel and the church through compassion and revelation. Compassion. Feeding Israel's hungry, caring for Israel's needy, repairing homes, giving hope to children in poverty, helping the Jewish people return to their ancient homeland. Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Revelation, bringing the Bible to life in its ancient context, revealing the truth of Israel's prophetic significance, telling the story of Israel's miraculous rebirth, connecting Christians and the Jewish people through a grassroots global team of Christian representatives. For God's instruction shall go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Bridges for Peace, a Matthew 25 ministry dedicated to supporting the nation of Israel and bridging the centuries-old gap between Christians and Jews. Bridges for Peace, your Israel connection.
And that's an overview of the work being carried out by Bridges for Peace. Tom, I have to ask you now, Rebecca's told me prior to this programme that come April, you guys would have been living in Israel for 30 years. What has it been like to live in Israel for that long, seeing some of the dramatic events during that time?
One of the amazing things is that the world actually looks different in Hebrew. So as we become Hebrew speakers, we read the Bible in Hebrew, and it seems different. The nation seems different. And our view of the news and security has changed, I would say, completely in the last 30 years. We are very security conscious. We are very conscious of the news, what's going on, various parts of the world, not just one part of the world. You know, I grew up in New York. In New York, I don't think I really watched the news very much because it didn't really affect what I was doing. I was in a small town, and there wasn't really anything in the news that affected me. But now I live in Jerusalem, and the news every day has something about Jerusalem. Every country in the world is looking at Jerusalem. And so we feel like the eyes of the world are focused on us. And because of that, we look at the world as if we need to look through the eyes of the world. It's a complete change as far as we're concerned. We look at the world and we see that God is doing something in every part of the world. We understand that, yes, there's conflict in the Middle East, but the core of that, the very core of it, now we understand is religious. It's a religious core. It's not political. There won't be a political solution. We understand that we'll try, and there may be good work in that direction, but the solid center of the whole issue is who is God. And we serve that one. We serve the one living true God. And we love that because that puts us right in the center of what's happening in the world today.
Absolutely. And Rebecca, how has Bridges for Peace been able to meet some of the challenge that Israel has faced over the last couple of decades? You know, the horrendous suicide bombings, the terrorist attacks, the rockets, the missiles, and the situation that we saw in Gaza last year with the Hamas protests of trying to storm the fence, as well as you've been living through, I think, 2 intifadas as well during that time.
Yes, well, that's
and the Gulf War.
That is a big question. You know, having lived in Israel for the last almost 30 years, we have learned what it is to face those things, and it's cyclical. It's really odd, but you have an immense capability as a human being to absorb living in difficult times. I remember when Gilo, the neighborhood in Jerusalem, was being fired on almost every day, and we were living in that community. People would call us and they'd say, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And we'd say, "Oh yeah, we're on the safe side of Gilo." We were six blocks from where people were firing on other people. We would go for a walk on a Sunday afternoon, and there would be bullet fire. We could hear it. And it was 3 blocks away. People would be hanging their laundry, mothers would be pushing people in baby carts, you know, little babies, kids would be playing with a ball in the park, and we would be walking along talking about everyday things. And then my husband would say, "Oh, that was a 50 millimeter. Oh, that was Israel responding." And then we'd go right back to our conversation, because in some way, Israel has the ability to live the normal in the abnormal times. But at Bridges, one of the things that's important for us is that people would look at us as Christians who stand with them in time of need.
Absolutely.
And during the Gulf War, we didn't leave. Some Christian organizations sent all of their people to Cyprus and said, "We're going to get you to safety." But at Bridges for Peace, we didn't. We stayed right through. And the people around us looked at us and said, "You didn't run away. Why didn't you run away?" And we said, "Because we're Christians who love Israel, and we're going to stand with you." When we had the recent day of war, where hundreds of rockets were fired into Israel from Gaza, we were scheduled to do a food delivery down to the communities right that were being shot on. And we gave our driver the opportunity not to go. And he says, "Not go? Now's when they need to know that we stand with them." So he and his helper got in the truck with the truckload of food and went down and delivered it to all the communities along the border. When the fires were coming across the border, we immediately got in touch with someone that we knew and said, "What are the needs?" And we raised money for portable fire trailers where they could get right where the people in the community could have it right there, not wait for the fire department to get there, so that they could stomp out the fires as they're starting. We've bought bomb shelters. We have stood with the people of Israel through thick and thin, and we plan to continue to do that.
Let's have a reminder of what happened in November 2018, when 460 rockets and missiles were fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel's communities.
But we're going to turn to the Middle East now. Gaza and Israel are facing their worst violence in years amid escalating attacks by Israeli and Hamas forces. Hundreds of rockets were launched overnight as both sides exchanged fire. The deadly violence follows an apparently botched Israeli military mission in Gaza over the weekend. Charlie D'Agata is in the Israeli city of Ashkelon near the Gaza border. Charlie, good morning.
Good morning. This is just some of the damage left behind after waves of attacks here in Ashkelon. Last night, a Hamas or militant rocket slammed into this house and blew a hole in the wall. Miraculously, everybody here survived. Ashkelon is very close to Gaza, which is within range of militant rockets. It's also where a rocket hit an apartment and killed a man inside. Now, here's the scene last night. The Israeli military says some 400 rockets were fired into Israel. The famed Iron Dome defense system was able to intercept more than 100. Now, this morning, Palestinians in Gaza awoke to widespread destruction from Israeli airstrikes and tank fire. Now, the Israeli military says the targets included a Hamas TV and radio station and the group's alleged headquarters. Now, both sides have been brought back to the brink of war after that alleged botched commando mission that left 7 Hamas militants and 1 Israeli lieutenant colonel dead. Now, this morning, Hamas threatened to extend its reach to include further cities in what's already become the worst fighting this country has seen since the 2014 Gaza war. Nora?
All right, Charlie D'Agata in Israel, thank you.
And that's just a reminder of what happens when the situation in Israel flares up. Tom, as a tour guide, you must be used to this because, you know, we have to break this kind of media perception, and I'm probably a little bit guilty of this myself, is that when we look at Israel, we just see the conflict. And yet, when you're in Israel, you very rarely feel anything unless you are right next to, say, the communities next to the Gaza Strip, or you're next in the Palestinian areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority, then you might feel it. But generally in Israel, there might be a conflict going on, but you don't actually you don't actually feel it. How do we communicate to our Christian viewers who've never been to Israel to say that Israel is so safe, safer than London or New York City, that's for sure?
The most dangerous part of your trip will be your ride to the airport here. That's true. I'll tell you a story. Ariel Sharon went up on the Temple Mount, and that was the excuse for Intifada. Yep. That was in 2000. On that particular day, I had a tour group, I think I had 30-some people, and I was about a half hour in front of him. I had gone up there, and I had just exited from the Temple Mount as he was entering. During the day, I had security people come up to me. My whole day was scheduled to be in the old city of Jerusalem. From time to time, somebody would come up to me, and it was the funniest thing. They'd come, somebody I'd never heard before, never seen before in my life, come up to me, shake my hand, greet me like I'm their oldest friend, in Hebrew, of course, and very much in an enthusiastic sort of a tone would tell me, at the next corner, make sure you do not turn to the left because there's something going on there. Make sure you turn to the right at the next turn. The people in the group never knew a thing was going on. But during the day, several times during the day, security people would come to me in this sort of a motif, greet me as if I was their oldest friend, and tell me directions on what to happen. We managed to cover our entire itinerary for the day, never saw anything happening. At the evening, the folks went back to their hotel, and they watched the news on, I believe it was on CNN that night they were watching, and I got such a strong complaint in the morning because they wanted to know why I didn't take them to see any of the things that were going on. But we managed to finish the day, and they never knew there was anything going on until they got to the hotel in the evening. What I'm telling you is our security is amazing. Our people are so on the ball, and they know exactly where we are as tourists and as tour guides. They're in contact with me. I don't have to come find them. I don't have to look for them. They will find me, and they will give me instructions along the way, and they're extremely good at what they do, and they're very, very careful. So, in my years, and I've been 20 years as a tour guide, and my years as a tour guide, I've never had an incident where I was even close to being in danger, and the reason why is our security really is that good.
Excellent. And Rebecca, how does your organisation, Bridges for Peace, really respond to the fact that when there's a national crisis in Israel, you know, majority of the time, Israel's very peaceful, it's very pleasant, you wouldn't think if anything's going on. Even if something does go on, it's kind of magnified by our mainstream media coverage around the world, and then you're in Israel and you don't feel it at all. But when there are times of war and conflict, how, as an organisation, do you prepare Christians to respond to emergencies? Say, for example, take the Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza in 2014 as an example.
Right. So one thing we do is that we try to help Christians around the world understand what's going on, and we do this through a very active website. It's changed every day. We have news stories that we source that help people to understand what's really going on. But we're more than just an information outlet. We want to also be a group of people that respond positively. So recently, the city of Carmiel, where we have one of our centers, contacted us and said the situation on the northern border is really heating up, and we really need your help. We had been helping them over a period of time to fix up their bomb shelters, their municipal bomb shelters. But it was slow going, and so we were doing one a month or something like that. They still had 23 bomb shelters that needed fixing, and they said, we need it done quickly. So we called all of our staff in Jerusalem. We have 70 people on our staff in Israel, by the way. And we took teams up every week until we got all 23 of those done. And the mayor and the head of security in Carmiel were overjoyed to know that now those shelters were all ready to receive the people when they have the need. Hopefully we won't need it for a while, but that's one of the things we do. That doesn't cost a lot of money. That just costs a lot of time. We just need to get a lot of people there to fix up these places. But we also, for our team, people say, well, you've got team members from all over the world. How do you prepare them? So we have regular drills so they know what to do as far as going to the bomb shelters. We don't send anyone home. But if they want to go, we help them get to the airport. We're not holding them against their will. We've run with the Israelis to bomb shelters. I was in Netivot when the sirens went off, and we'd been told in advance, if they go off while you're here and you're in your car, leave the car, run and lay down in a ditch, or get in a doorway of a building or something, because a car turns into 1,000,000 pieces of shrapnel. So we were in the car when the siren went off. We knew we had 15 seconds to get to shelter. And we started to pull over, and the guy from the municipality was sitting in the back seat. He says, no, no, go, 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 faster, faster. So our driver sped up, and 2 blocks ahead there was a shelter. Pulled over to the side. We were jumping out of the car before it stopped, running with hundreds of Israelis into a shelter, barely got into the shelter when we heard the boom. So we know what it's like, but we don't live in fear. We continue to do what God has called us to do, to show the love of Jesus, the love of God to the people of Israel in their most needy times.
Fantastic. Really, really inspirational. So let's have a look now at how Bridges for Peace are helping to build these much-needed bomb shelters all across Israel.
Sometimes I'm asked how we use the funds we receive for victims of war. And of course, at Bridges for Peace, what we are trying to do is to show God's love and compassion to the people of Israel. And who needs love and compassion more than those who have been wounded or have lost a family member to war or terrorism? One of the things we do is to provide camps for children who have lost someone in their family to terrorism. But another thing we do is we put bomb shelters in at-risk communities. And these bomb shelters literally save lives, ensuring that there will be less victims of war. One of our friends is Rabbi Shmuel Bowman from Operation Life Shield, and today I had an interview with him. Please listen to what he has to say.
Thanks, Becky. It's great to be here. Operation Life Shield, first and foremost, is a grassroots organization. It was founded in 2006 during the height of the Second Lebanon War. And what happened is that we realized, and the Army realized, and the Home Front Command realized, that the kind of shelters that we had in northern Israel, that wasn't going to work anymore. We needed shelters that people could literally run to. They could drop whatever they were doing. They could be at the running track. They could be dropping their children off to a kindergarten, and they could literally go quickly to an accessible above-ground shelter and then be there for really just a few minutes, let the danger pass, and then get on with their lives. Let's save lives, let's protect lives, let's bring people comfort, and that's how it all started. And as a result, since 2006, we've really had the opportunity, the privilege of placing hundreds of shelters, which translates into protecting thousands and thousands of lives in both northern Israel and in southern Israel.
Well, it's been part of our privilege to also have been able to purchase a few of those shelters to be placed in vulnerable places. So we're really thankful that you give us the opportunity to partner with you.
So, you know, when we first started Operation Life Shield, I really didn't expect that help would be coming from our Christian brothers and sisters. And wow, all this, you know, really from within almost the first couple of days of starting and founding the organization, that really the knock on the door came. We realized that we had real allies with our Christian brothers and sisters. But something amazing happens when a child comes out of that bomb shelter and looks at the sign on the wall to see where did this shelter come from? And they see that it came from an organization of Christians. And they realize very quickly that we are literally in a time in history that they've never been in before. May we continue to build that bridge and make it strong and invite as many people as possible to walk on this bridge with us.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
And these bomb shelters are so vital for Israel's protection, protecting all of Israel's ethnic communities as well as Israelis. Tom, you were featured in that excellent video there, Rabbi Shmuel Bowman, and fantastic guy. I've had the privilege of interviewing, must be about 5 years ago I interviewed him, but a fantastic guy. Can you share with us the partnership really between his organisation, Operation Life Shield, and Bridges for Peace, and how practically Bridges has been able to help Israel, particularly building these bomb shelters that are so vital for Israel's security and protection of Israel's population?
I remember going to a kibbutz near the Gaza Strip where we were dedicating one of these shelters, and it was so much fun because the children came out to join us, to be participants, and they were so happy. The children were learning a little bit of English, and so they wanted to try to speak to us in English, and their English was absolutely horrid. But it didn't matter because they were so much fun to be around. My point here is that it's all about the children. It's all about the people who are being saved from potential life-threatening disaster. And for us, for particular, Shmuel, it's about the fact that it doesn't matter who we're helping so much as it is that we are helping. Our point is that we should be representatives of God's love and God's faithfulness. Okay, so some of the shelters are used by Arab kids, and some of the shelters are used by Orthodox Jewish kids, and some of the shelters are used by secular Jewish kids, and some of them are something else altogether. Doesn't matter. The point is that we are doing what we can as God's hands and God's giving and God's abilities. We're helping to make the world into that place which is safe and good for the little kids. We love the kids.
Excellent. And Rebecca, I mean, we look at the situation in the north, and you mentioned that before. The fact is that there was something like 180,000 Hezbollah rockets aimed at Israel with the capabilities of reaching deep into Israel, population centres such as Tel Aviv, such as Jerusalem. The prospect now of the Iranian forces building up en masse only 30 miles from Israel's border, it seems like the next big conflict is going to come from the north. And they're saying that Hezbollah and Iran could fire thousands of rockets, not 460 as we saw from Hamas in one day, but literally anything like 1,600 rockets in one day. Can you describe how vital it is to have these bomb shelters in place so that it can protect as many Israelis as possible?
Well, my husband and I live in Carmiel in the north, so we're only 10 kilometers away from the Lebanon border, very close. And every home that's built there has a bomb shelter built into the home. So our home has what's called a sealed or a safe room, where the walls are much thicker and reinforced. If the building took a direct hit, that part of the building would remain intact. But if you're not at home when something happens, then you have to have the places around the community that you can run into. And so that's when it's really important to have these bomb shelters near schools, near businesses, near places of employment, so that people can run to safety. And we're committed to helping as much as we can. During the 2006 conflict with Lebanon, we were bringing supplies from Jerusalem. The army, our contacts in the army were contacting us and saying, this is what's needed. There's 1 million people sitting in shelters. For 34 days, people were most of the time in shelters, and they're dismal places. So we realized then we needed to do something to fix up the existing shelters and in addition to adding extra bomb shelters. We were one weekend, I remember we got a call saying that there's a problem with supplies getting to the army. Can you prepare 6,000 emergency packets for soldiers? We worked through the weekend, round the clock, with our volunteers to produce these packets, and of course in every one of them went a card saying this is coming from Christians who love you and are supporting you. There was a book of Psalms put in each one, as well as the food and the things that they needed. And those were delivered to the army up in the northern part of Israel, and then our team went with the army to take them up to the border. Later, families of these soldiers came into our center and said they had no water. Your basket with water and food in it was just at the right time, and everything we do like this is to build that relationship between Christians and Jews. So you know that most Jewish people feel like Christians are the source of most of their persecution. Quite a negative history that we have between the two peoples. So we can't change the past. I wish we could. Absolutely. But what we're doing is we're trying to change the future. And everything that we can do that changes the heart of a Christian or a Jewish person toward the other is part of changing that future.
Absolutely. And Tom, also the work that you do at Bridges for Peace is to look after lonely Holocaust survivors. sadly, they're dying out now, but it's so important that they're honoured and they're looked after. Can you share with us the nature of this work and maybe also a story of that you might have?
Well, the Holocaust survivors, as you've mentioned, they're getting old. We mostly have the ones who were children during the Holocaust at this point. The older folks have passed away by now. Numbers are dwindling. But those who are remaining are still the ones who are bearing witness to what took place during the Holocaust. So we pay special attention to hear their stories, to make sure their stories go on to the next generation and those following. And it's not just about the stories, it's about the people themselves. Some of these people are just absolutely heroes. I remember one lady, Rena, who was a young person during the Holocaust, and she loves to tell the story to inspire other young folks that they can be the one that stops the same thing from happening again. They can be the one who will speak up, who will take political action to make sure the evil which surrounds us, let's face it, we live in a world in which there's a lot of evil things going on, that these young folks will be the ones that can stand up and say, no, we're not going to participate in that. We are going to be God's hands of love to the world around us. But it's not just the Rena and those people like her. It's others who are so deeply wounded that they don't even talk. They certainly don't spend any time telling the world about what happened. They're basically hiding because they're so wounded by the past. But we can touch them and we can show them love as well. And we can have our young adults. I love our young adults. Just recently, they went out to several homes of Holocaust survivors, and one of the pictures that I saw on Facebook the other day was a couple of our young girls hugging quite an old lady. And she had the most wonderful smile on her face because we had literally touched her with love. And she could feel the love. And, you know, to some degree, that makes her world a much more livable world, something she can now look around her and love some of the things in the world around her, even though she's deeply wounded still yet, so many years later.
Amazing. So let's have a look now, this very inspirational video of how Bridges for Peace is actually helping Holocaust survivors in Israel.
I came in Israel in 1992. I am from Kiev. My husband was very sick. He could not fly in Israel with the airplane. We came 4 people. My husband in this condition. My mother was also very sick, was from the survivors people. And I am also from the survivors people because I was with her in the concentration camp in Treblinka. And I also was not so young, I was 54. I could not leave them, they need my help all the time. So it was very difficult time. It was my first meeting with Bridges Peace. And they helped me till now. It is 25, 26 will be years that they helped me. They are my biggest friend. God bless you for everything. Thank you very much for your help, for your willing to know about us. You know, it's very important for us to know that somebody wants to be close to us and to know our stories and everything.
Very moving. Rebecca, just kol hakavod in Hebrew for that work, because, you know, God hasn't forgotten these amazing people, and literally they are survivors. To imagine what they've been through, particularly that woman there had been through Treblinka as well, to come out that, survive that, and then to reach out to them, you know, and there's so much more needs to be done. Can you share what it's like when you actually show that love of God to these survivors of the Holocaust, to make them feel that in their last chapters of their life that they're not alone, that there are Christians who love them and support them, and how much impact has that had?
I think they're actually, in the beginning, quite amazed. You know, most of their understanding of what happened in the Holocaust involves the idea that the Nazis were Christians. And I remember in the beginning days when I would meet a Jewish person and that would come up, I would say, no, 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 you're wrong. That's not true. Hitler was not a Christian. The Nazis were not Christians. How could you think that? And they would look at me in astonishment and they'd say, what are you talking about? Of course they were Christians. Why? They wore crosses. They were members of the church. The church never excommunicated them. They celebrated Christmas and Easter, and they forced our musicians to play in orchestras and play Christian music while their family members were being murdered. How can you say they weren't Christians? It's quite astonishing to realize the depth of that understanding amongst the Jewish people. It was shocking to me as a Christian from the United States. I remember visiting with the mayor of Ramleh. We had gone there to see if we could help with some new immigrants that were moving into his town. And so part of the meeting I said, well, what's your story? Where did you come from? Oh, I was born in Israel. Well, where did your parents come from? And both of his parents were Holocaust survivors. And he told a story, a little bit about their stories, their individual paths. And I responded by saying, that is so tragic. That's such a horrible story. I'm so sorry. And he looked at me and he said, no, it's normal. He said, everyone has such a story. And in my heart, I was just screaming in my heart and saying, no, that should not be normal. That cannot be normal going forward. And we spoke a little bit before we started this show about the rise in anti-Semitism in Europe and even here in the UK. And it's shocking to us to know that what happened 70-some years ago in Europe could happen again. So I want to say to the mayor of Ramleh, whose parents survived, no, we're not going to let that happen on our watch. As Christians, we're going to fight against anti-Semitism. We're going to fight against Christian anti-Semitism, and we're going to fight against the theologies that lend it credence. We're going to stand up for the God of the Bible. We're going to read our Bibles and see what God has to say instead of what theologians from past eras had to say. When we're in Israel, we often get opportunities to meet with people who are either survivors or who are children of survivors. You know, there's something called second-generation Holocaust survivors. And so we hear many of their stories, and I never cease to be horrified at the evil that men can visit on other people. And I don't ever want to be part of that perpetuating again. You know, you asked about a story. There was a lady that came to speak to our group. She was a child during the Holocaust, and she was saved by a Christian Dutch family. She's a spunky little gal. She's I don't know, about 5 foot tall. She had a streak of purple running through her hair. So she was something else. She was telling her story about this Christian family that hid her and that saved her life. And that Christian Dutch family thought that they were saving one little girl. And that's true, they did. But as her story went on, she told about having children and then having grandchildren and now having a couple of great-grandchildren. And as she's telling her story, I'm adding up the numbers. And I suddenly realized that that Dutch couple didn't save one little Jewish girl. What they saved was 17 Jewish people so far.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible.
You know.
And Tom, sadly, you know, we're living in a climate of Jew hatred, the extent that we haven't really seen since the 1930s and 40s. We're seeing that hatred for Israel is rising, particularly on this continent in Britain and in Europe, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. As Christians, what should our response be to this growing rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing in the world today?
Our job as Christians is to be not just responsible, but responsive to what's going on in the world around us. We are required to be righteous. We are required to be a funnel of God's love to the world around us. We are required to be light in this dark world that we live in. And you know what? We can do that. So my response to you is, as Christians, our job is to be fire in this world. Our light is to shine. Light is eternal by its very nature, and we can be God's representation of light in the world around us. Now, I recognize the world is going to be evil. That's true. But that doesn't mean I have to be. And so in this evil world, no matter how evil it is around me, I am required to be light.
And Becca, looks like we're down to the last 5 minutes of the programme, really. So a kind of practical question. What role can our viewers play in supporting the inspirational and incredible work that you've presented before us, done by Bridges for Peace?
So I would say, first of all, start with prayer. I really encourage Christians all over the world to do what the scripture says, to pray for the peace of Israel, of Jerusalem, to be like watchmen on the wall, giving God no rest until he establishes Jerusalem and makes it a praise in the earth. So that's the first thing, prayer. And of course, prayer needs to undergird everything we do. But then there's also action. Because, you know, as James said, faith without works is dead. We need to combine our prayer and our faith with our works. And for some people, that might mean coming to Israel. It might mean coming on a tour and spending your money, your vacation dollars or your vacation pounds, excuse me, in Israel and helping the economy. It might mean coming as a volunteer with Bridges for Peace or another organization and saying, you know what, I'm going to show my love physically on a daily basis to the people of Israel. But many of you won't be able to come. Many people won't be able to come. So we encourage them to give to support the projects of Bridges for Peace. The money that's given helps us to buy the food for the 22,000 people a month. It helps us to bring people from the former Soviet Union who don't have the funds to do that. But more than that, every gift we give speaks loudly of the fact that there are Christians around the world who want to see them blessed and who are willing to dig down into their wallets and their purses and give of their own hard-earned income in order to see the people of Israel blessed. As it says in Genesis 12, verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Right now, Christians all over the world are seeking to be a blessing as they give to further God's work in Israel and the Middle East.
And Tom, it seems very clear that we're in an extraordinary period, particularly after the second intifada that occurred in 2000, and that wall of partition between Israel and Christians, and that wall between Christians and Jewish communities in the diaspora is really breaking down in our day. How is that done? And that's what I like about your organisation, Bridges for Peace, is because it's so practical. You're showing practical love, and my experience of and friendship with the Jewish people has always told me that when they see that practical outworkings of love, that's when they respond.
It's amazing that as Christians we can sit and listen to our Jewish brothers and sisters, and we can pray together, and we can love. Unconditional, that's the word, unconditional love. Some of the Jewish people really don't like us. It's not pertinent. We don't even need to deal with that, because that's not what our love is about. It's not dependent upon somebody else. It's dependent upon God's love. And that's what changes the picture. It's not because we're such good people. It's not because we say the right things. It's all about God's love, and hopefully God's love shining through us. I like to say that it's one of our great privileges to be allowed to be part of God's plan. It's not that we're doing the plan, it's all God. But we are privileged to be part of what God is doing in the world around us.
And Rebecca, it must be quite extraordinary to think that you've been in Israel nearly 30 years and seeing God show his love and his compassion upon Israel and the Jewish people through practical ways. Can you share with us any kind of future projects that you may have that we haven't discussed on the programme?
So everything we do, I like to think, is because God has a plan and a purpose. And as I read the prophetic word, there's a few things that haven't happened yet. One is the deserts of Israel. Over and over again in the scriptures, it links the return of the Jewish people with the greening or the restoring of the deserts. And So I'm praying about, and our team, our board is praying about what we should do as far as that is happening. Right now, Israel is expanding to the south. Beersheba, once a little sleepy desert town, is now a booming town, and parts of industry are going that way. Fast trains are linking all parts of the country. And of course, the desalination plants are making it possible to actually think in terms of the deserts one day being as green as the rest of Israel. So it's very possible that you'll hear in the days to come that Bridges for Peace is involved in some sort of project to help to develop the southern part of Israel. At the same time, we continue to be very interested in immigration and bringing the Jewish people home. Every one of the prophets talked about the day when God would bring his people home, and we are part of that. So I plan to continue to be involved in being a partner with God, as Tom said, as he fulfills his prophetic word, until the day when Jesus sets his feet on the Mount of Olives and he is able to reveal himself in person to all of us. I see that Bridges for Peace has a role to play.
Fantastic. I just want to thank you so much, Rebecca and Tom. You're a fantastic couple for being on the Middle East Report today and sharing some of the inspirational and incredible work of love carried out by Bridges for Peace in bringing comfort to Israel and the Jewish people. And all I can say is kol hakavod. It's fabulous, and I've been encouraged, and I'm sure our viewers have as well. So thank you so much for being my guest on today's programme.
It was a pleasure.
And I just want to thank you for watching today's Middle East Report. We've learned about some of the incredible practical workings of love shown by Bridges for Peace in reaching out to Israel and the Jewish communities around the world, and how it's important that as Christians we stand with Israel and we communicate God's love and plan and his purpose that he has for his chosen people. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.
And the bride say come, the Spirit and the bride say come, the Spirit and the bride say come.